So this is a meaty question, but is there any way to describe what makes a film a good fit for the Sundance Film Festival?
It, it's a question. Sorry about that. It's a question that we get a lot, and I feel like the answer we have might be frustrating to people, but it's like not really. That, and part of it is that we play a lot of different types of films. Like if you look at our lineup, we last year we had something around 100 projects and feature projects, and there's all kinds of films in there, not only just international and U.S. and doc and fiction, but there are more commercial films. There are artistic films. There are genre films. There are the films that are bending for the form. So and I think people have obviously an idea of what a Sundance film is, but I think if you actually look at the things we play, it's all kinds of things. So it's very difficult to say, oh, this is exactly what we would play, because we are very diverse in the types of forms of films we're playing. So and really it is like part of what we're doing is watching the movies. So we're trying to, make a slate that does speak to lots of different audiences in lots of different ways. So there really is no one answer to that, even though everyone, thinks that maybe like A Little Miss Sunshine is the exact example of what we're looking for all the time, but that's not really the case. We're looking for all kinds of films.
Yeah, we really don't want to limit ourselves. So I think that's the other thing is we would just want to be open to what everyone is making and be responsive to that. And I think the diversity of the program reflects that too.
Great. And could you explain the different categories within the program? Because I know there's a spotlight, there's like a next, there's a midnight, or like the other ones. Could you explain like what each one?
Yeah, so people are probably pretty familiar with our competitions. So we have 4 central competitions. We've got 2 international ones and 2 US based ones, or US films. One in documentary, one each in documentary, and one each in for narrative, which we call our dramatic competitions. Outside of those, we have our premieres section that tends to be films where often the directors might have already had multiple films under their belt. An example being like Call Me by Your Name, Lupe Guadagnino. Films that have a scope in that sense. So those tend to go under premieres. We have our next section, which is one of my personal favorites. You always find some edgy, interesting work in that section, and it's films that are really pushing the boundaries. They used to be only US based. Now we're doing international films in next as well. We have our midnight section. That's not only for genre films. Like we've played documentaries, we've played comedies. It's really just a section for, I guess, an alternative midnight audience, shall we say. But it's a pretty broad section in terms of the different films we play. But yes, of course, you'll often find some genre and some horror films in there as well. Spotlight is one of our smallest sections. It is a section where we play films that have played at other festivals, like films that we fell in love with, that we wish we could have shown or wanted to also show as part of the festival. So we don't do it like an open call for entries for that section. But we do tend to just play films that we've seen throughout the year in that section. And that's usually about 3 or 4 films lately. And then we also have our family matinee section, which is for our younger and family-based audiences. Am I forgetting any, Sudeep?
No, no, family matinees is sometimes always forgotten, but no. I mean, we've had a New Frontier section too, where it's would be maybe more, lack of a better term, like experimental or like, avant-garde type stuff, like, non-narrative type films. But I think the other thing to mention too is that when you submit to the festival, you're not submitting to a section. Like we are watching them, thinking about what section it could go into. So you don't have to like say, I want to be considered for midnight. We where our process works is that we are considering it for all these sections, and we're thinking about the films, where could it work, and where would it be best for the film and for the festival in terms of where to put it. So on your end as a submitter, it's good to know like these are sections, just to know what the type of things we're playing, but you don't have to worry about it in terms of submitting to those sections.
Great. So could you talk a little bit about how the programming team is structured?
Sure. So we have a documentary team and we also have a fiction team, but the reality is we have a very collaborative process. So we all watch all kinds of films, especially as we get closer to the end of the process and we're sort of sharing films amongst each other and kind of making and kind of putting the program together and really shaping what the sections look like. We're all kind of watching everything. So even though like Sudeep focuses more on documentary and I focus more on fiction, at the end of the day, we're all kind of watching a little bit of everything. And then we have, again, sort of like sub teams too. Like there is a midnight team, but again, we share midnight films with the whole group. And something that is very unique to Sundance, I think, is also this collaborative sense of the programming. And I think in some ways that's so great because it really ensures that there's just like so many voices in the process and that the program feels really balanced because everyone has a voice in that room.
And are there any, sorry, Sudeep, were you going to say something?
No, I was just agreeing.
Okay. Are there any pre-screeners with these submissions?
Yeah, we have a bunch of screeners that are paid, that are watching films as well, and they're writing coverage, and we are as programmers also like reading their coverage, but also oftentimes like watching the films that they're suggesting too. It's just because of the sheer number of films we have, it's not possible for all of us to go through all of them. But the way the process has been built is that we are really always looking for the unique stuff that speaks to somebody, and there's, a lot of films that are being submitted, they're being seen 2, 3, 4 times that maybe that the idea that a screener is seeing the film is not meaning that like it's not being considered, like it's a very rigorous process that goes through a lot of different checks. We have a lot of different points throughout that we're like reviewing what we're doing, and Anna was saying, we're talking to each other a lot throughout this.
Gotcha. And those pre-screeners are watching it from beginning to end, or are they watching like just a chunk of it or something?
They're writing, they're watching beginning and end, and they're writing coverage about it too. That's like doing. Yeah. So and we also like anyone who's like watching a film for the first time on our team is definitely watching it beginning to end.
Okay, great. And I know you mentioned that you have different programmers for different categories. Do you have an average of how many programs you have for each of those categories, or since I know it's all collaborative and.
You mean films and the number of films we have in each program?
No, not the number of films, but the people that you have on your programming team. Like how many, like per category?
So there's 13 of us, but again, because the categories are sort of like fluid. I mean, I think there's like 5 on the doc team, but really like it's, again, we're watching everything and things don't tend to always fall again neatly into the teams or the categories. So it does tend to be a very like all 13 of us sort of.
I mean, like to say too is like everything that's in the final lineup, we've all watched together, all 13 of us. We've all discussed very intensely. So it is within each group, like Anna was saying too, is like it's not we have to go through a process where everyone's watching it at the end too. So like it's, even though we have focuses, it's not like limited to that. So it's really kind of spread across the whole thing.
Cool. Is there any subject matter that you avoid in your programming?
No, I don't.
Well, I was going to say, I wouldn't say we like shy away from something on principle. We want to be able to like consider everything and have a conversation about it and see what's, what it's bringing up for people. But I don't think there's anything where we're kind of like, oh, we would never show this kind of film or,
We've played very difficult stuff, like difficult subject matters, like, docs and fiction in terms of like what they're about. And we don't, we respond to the work that people are submitting. We're not like saying beforehand, these are things that we don't want to discuss or don't want to really show at the festival.
Yeah. In a case like that, I think what we try and do is just ensure that everyone, that we have like plans in place for like safety and so, things like that so that everyone can feel, so that we know what's going on and like on the ground, if we're like expecting, any kind of controversy to surface, we just try to be operationally prepared, but we want to again be open to the work of everybody.
Gotcha. So I know you mentioned before about the pre-screeners and everything. Could you talk us through the review and selection process and what that timeline looks like? You don't have to go into all the detail, but just like in broad strokes, like.
Sure. I mean, so our submissions open in May. So they've been open for quite a couple months already. They're about to close on Monday for features. For shorts, they've been closed for a couple weeks already. And I mean, we're really watching like all year round, pretty much. So even though our submissions officially open in May, I feel like people start sending us stuff maybe by March, and the festival ends at the end of January, start of February, and then we're really just like wrapping it out a little bit, and having like meetings and discussing what went well and what didn't, and sort of thinking about planning for next year. But at that point, we're really just jumping right back into screening. And then a big part of our jobs, too, is just traveling and taking meetings around the world and sort of like and keeping and really tracking like new projects and making sure that we're sort of have our pulse on what's coming up for the next year. So that kind of work is ongoing and happens all year round.
This is an intense period. It just is like the nature of it. Like our with the submissions being due on Monday. We announced in the program in mid-December, and the festival's in late January. So like this is we are watching a lot of films right now and talking to each other about what we're watching, and it's just the nature of the year, where we are watching starting in May, even earlier, but this is where a lot of people are, with deadlines encourage people. And we have our own deadlines. This is just a time where it's a very focused period, I think, of watching and talking about what we're going to play.
So could you walk us through I guess the steps involved with that? So you're watching all these films, and then after I'm guessing after the late deadline closes, that's when you really deliberate. But could you tell us, like, we go through this and then we go through this and then that leads to X?
A lot of it is we are tracking films. We're just like excited about things that people are making, or just like through our submission portal on Film Freeway, we're watching films, and there isn't really, since there's 13 of us, we're kind of there is no specific marching orders in terms of like, besides doc fiction or something like that, where we're all picking things that we're watching, and at the same time the screeners are also watching things too, so they're also doing reviews, and we're reviewing those reviews. So it is and then there are films that our colleagues are also saying, hey, I saw this and I think it's interesting. You should watch it too. So we're watching that as well. So it's like kind of all at the same time in a way, like, and there are films that then we're moving forward in our process in order to all talk about it together as a team. And we have those discussions and those meetings. And then it's a multi-month week process where we're, building the program individually by film.
And because it's such a small program, like relative to the size of submissions that we get, as much as possible, we really try to, have everything reviewed and discussed before we really invite things. So like we really do that towards the very end of the process, so that we have a sense of like, okay, we know what's been submitted, and we have a sense of that before we really kind of like confirm the program.
Gotcha. And is there any advantage or disadvantage to submitting early, regular, or late?
Not really. I mean, there's pros and cons to both, right? Like if you're submitting, I think the answer to this is more just like submit when the film is ready. Like give the film the time that it needs, and really submit when you feel that it's in its most presentable state. Because really, like, again, we don't know, like we only have a chance to really like see it once. We don't tend to watch multiple cuts, even though folks are welcome to update their cut on their submission. There's no guarantee at what point one of us will have seen which cut. So it's just important to feel like the film is ready. In terms of early versus late, there's advantages and disadvantages. You submit early, and if, we love it and we, have it top of mind early on, and it's, helping to set the bar, that's great. But then it also has to sort of like last through the whole season versus if you submit it like, with an extension at the very last minute, we're getting a lot of films right around then. So the volume is just like really high. So there's just, there's pros and cons on both sides. But at the end of the day, it really should just be of when the film is ready because we're viewing and it's ongoing the whole time.